What's up, everybody? So I just finished watching the official Blizzard live stream where they went over some of the issues that players have been seeing in Diablo 4 since launch, as well as some of the things they plan to change or adjust going into Season 1 and prior to Season 1. I'll go ahead and give you the TLDR, basically the main points of the talk, so you don't have to sift through the whole live stream, and I'll give you a little bit of my thoughts and opinions regarding those, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so I'm going to go over this list a little bit out of order. I'm going to give you the most impactful changes first, some of the more things you may be interested in, and then we'll go over some of the more minor things at the end. So if you're kind of curious on the more pressing things and whether they discuss those, we're going to go over that first. So one of the big things that they announced that the hardcore community will probably be very excited for is the hopeful resolution to the disconnect problem. Basically, for those who don't know, right now if you disconnect in game, your character stands there for quite some time. It's causing a lot of people who are playing in hardcore to literally lose their characters. Whether their internet goes down, Blizzard servers go down, or some sort of bug occurs, they're logging back into a character select screen, and that is super unacceptable when you've spent maybe 100 hours on a character and suddenly you lose internet for a moment and it's all gone. This has prevented a lot of people from even getting into hardcore, and the change that they announced during the live stream should hopefully resolve it. They talked about basically when you disconnect, they plan to implement an automatic use of your scroll of escape. For those who don't know, the scroll of escape instantly teleports you to town. So in theory, when you disconnect, it should attempt to use a scroll in your inventory, getting you to town safely as long as you have that scroll. So that's an in-game mechanism. It's got a resource to it. It's something that you do have to plan for and have, which honestly, they are a little common in game. Something that a lot of players are suggesting is what PoE has. Basically, whenever you log out in PoE, your character is vanished from the world, immediately safe. And this enables a lot of players to use logout macros in order to prevent death whenever they see death coming. And honestly, I think a lot of people don't want to see that in Diablo because it basically just enables a cheese mechanic where if something is going to kill you, you just hit the button and you're good. You know, you create a macro that logs you out, and that's not great. The in-game solution that Diablo has for getting out of danger is the scroll of escape. And so utilizing that during a disconnect would be a good middle ground for helping people that are disconnected, but not enabling people any better method than just hitting the scroll in danger, right? So I think that's a pretty good change. I'm excited for it because I play hardcore, and so hopefully they implement that thing well, it works, and people stop having so much frustration losing their character to bugs and disconnects. So inventory management. They talked about inventory management a bit, but honestly, they didn't really give us very good resolutions to our inventory issues. Inventory management is a pretty big point of contention for a lot of players, simply because the game doesn't give us enough inventory space. They talked about gems a lot, which isn't really the main issue. Gems take about half a bank inventory space with all the different flawless and royals that most players are hoarding onto. And basically their solution there is they're going to be making gems one of the materials in our material tab. Now, while this will free up a little bit of inventory space, I think this is kind of a loss in terms of how the game plays and how the loot feels within the game. Honestly, I'm never excited whenever I pick up a Veiled Crystal or a Coiling Ward. I feel like when you find a good gem, it should be something rewarding where you're going, ooh, I got a flawless skull, and that's valuable, right? Right now, the gems are dropping in an overabundance. They don't really mean a whole lot. And honestly, if they just wind up just sticking them in this tab, I feel like it's just going to feel like Coiling Wards. I never noticed when I picked them up. I don't really care about them at all. I just have them and I use them to upgrade things, right? So I think them moving gems over to this tab is kind of convoluting the materials just in general. I'm not a fan of the change. We are going to get about a half bank inventory load, but honestly, I'm just going to fill that up with legendaries in like 5 minutes. So I don't see how that really resolves any of our inventory space issues. But that is what that is. So they're going to be moving that in season 2. Gems are going to be materials. Other than that, they touched a little bit during the Q&A section at the end about adding search functionality to our banks, which that's good. That's actually really good if we're able to search for legendary aspects and whatnot. definitely will appreciate that. But they didn't talk about increasing space in any way. They didn't talk about how we're going to get all this stuff into our bank. We're 10 days in, and I think every player's bank is literally full. So kind of a big letdown on inventory discussion. Hopefully they expand upon it later. But that's pretty much it for what they said would change for inventory. Okay, so on to Renown. This is something that a lot of players are arguing about on different forums, on the Reddit. And we're going to go over exactly what Blizzard said about it, which wasn't very concrete. But here we go. So basically, they said some of the aspects of Renown are going to carry on through the season. So you won't have to unlock them all for each character. Now, they kind of were a little like cloudy in the details here because they said you won't have to do it going forward. You won't have to explore the map or unlock all the Renown. But then they also said that you won't get some of the benefits like Paragon board unlocks unless you do it again. So it sounds like we are going to have to do it again if you want some of the benefits like Paragon board, which is very important. You know, like 4 Paragon points per area is massive. So I think most characters are going to have to do that grind again, it sounds like. Now, I'm going to give you my hot take opinion on this one because a lot of players are complaining, saying they don't ever want to do the Renown grind again. Personally, I think if we're starting fresh on a brand new season, I'm more of the kind of person that just wipe everything. We should all have to start over from a fresh slate and be able to compete. Because there's going to be leaderboards, there's going to be, and that's the idea of a season. You start over and you start from the beginning. I don't understand really this whole, I don't want to have to do the game again. Just let me be done with it and stick me in season 1. Well, like, what does that even, you already did it. So personally, I think we should have to redo the whole progression. But honestly, there are points to be made on the other side of the fence. The altars of Lilith are pretty obnoxious to go around and get. That might just be a design flaw of how altars of Lilith work. You have to usually use a third-party website in order to find where all of them are because they're pretty well hidden, and no one's going to go around and just crawl through every inch of the map in order to find them. So I think it would be great if they find some sort of middle ground saying, like, you have to do the progression again, but some of these more annoying points to them, like finding all the altars of Lilith, should be mitigated some. So we don't have to do it, or maybe they're just on the map and you just grab them as you go, because that would be a lot nicer. But anyways, they didn't really say exactly what we need to do and what exactly we're going to get without having to do the Renown bit again. But it sounds like we are going to keep some of the progress going into the season. And honestly, I bet they're just going to lay out more details later because they were very cloudy in their description of what we get and what we don't get in this bit. So anyways, that's the Renown piece. Let's move on. All right. So Nightmare Dungeon buffs. They got into this discussion when talking about the nerfs that they have made to several dungeons throughout the world. For those who may not know, there is an emerging meta among people who are trying to level as fast as possible, where they run normal dungeons on repeat. They'll pick a dungeon that has a small area, a high concentration of elites. They'll clear that dungeon. Sometimes not even the boss, because that is a loss of time as far as the EXP per minute goes. And they'll reset the dungeon, go right back in, and clear those elites again. Now, this is creating a very repetitive meta that'll probably burn a lot of players out. So I think Blizzard is seeing this. They're nerfing those methods so that people will branch out and do things like Nightmare Dungeons. Well, honestly, the obvious fact that you are probably thinking already is, why don't they just buff Nightmare Dungeons? So they talked about that, and that's a good thing. They are going to be buffing Nightmare Dungeons. But honestly, the way that they talked about it is kind of an odd method. So they said that to buff Nightmare Dungeons, we're going to be teleporting directly to them. Since players are using normal dungeons as a means of running them repeatedly without having to walk anywhere, they want to match that with Nightmare Dungeons, removing the travel time. Now, my hot take here is, I don't know why we're removing the travel time when we could just buff Nightmare Dungeons. That seems pretty obvious in my opinion. Personally, I think teleporting to dungeons straight from town on repeat will, like, just remove the open world at that point. Why do we even have it if we're not going to be using it? That's something that World of Warcraft did with their game. And a lot of people hate that. You remove a lot of the open world feel. It makes the game feel more lobby instanced. We're just going to basically be clicking things and going straight to dungeons, running them, and then repeating as fast as we can. I think instead of that, they should be buffing Nightmare Dungeons to a point where the travel time is worth it. Also buffing some things that maybe the travel there is more interesting. Buff goblins, so that if we see a goblin, we're excited, we get something nice. Or maybe the whispering chests, they're pretty garbage right now. But yeah, so that's their planned intended changes for season 1. Personally, I would like to see just more of a shift into rewarding us for exploration and doing varied content. And so hopefully, I mean, buffing the dungeons is a win in general. Hopefully that'll be the go-to for leveling quickly, but we'll see. Those changes should be coming in season 1. All right, so back to the top of the list with item bugs. This is something that players have been complaining about because it is a pretty major issue for some. There are some major bugs that are causing issues with druids right now. Druids are not getting certain unique drops. There are some bugs that are killing players. Apparently, when you're a necromancer, there's some sort of bug that can just flat out kill you. There also is a bug with world boss caches where you won't be able to open them. They'll be like level 80 when you're level 70. And so they talked about fixing that. Those changes should be coming in a major patch before season 1. So they talked, I think, about season 1 being mid to late July. So we could expect that in like 4 weeks or whatever. And then we should get a pretty big patch fixing some major problems before then. Other than that, that's pretty much everything they went over. I paid pretty good attention, and we've been going over this list on Wowhead from the thing. I'll put a link to this in the chat for anyone interested in just the text format here. And I'll link to their live stream video as well, so you can watch the whole thing if you want to do that. But other than that, anyways, guys, thank you for listening. I hope that this was helpful to you and you enjoyed it. If you agree or disagree with any of my takes, I'd actually love to hear them. Put it in the comments, or you can catch me live. I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/Nazori. I'm currently leveling a druid that is level 73, hardcore. Hopefully we don't die. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you around.